Zoom me in.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being here. As a quick reminder, I want to remind you to turn off your cell phones and please make note of the side and front entrances as emergency exits. To start off, we'll go ahead and do roll call. Ms. Cadetzi, when you're ready.
Josie Bonhart,
Here.
Stephanie Crable,
Here.
Pat Bradford,
I am here.
Thank you. Let us stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. That brings us to the approval of the agenda. And I make a motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
Any discussion?
Yeah, a couple questions.
Yes, ma'am.
Wondering why policy 5008 is back on this agenda when it was already approved here to go to the board.
I believe that there was a small change in the typo whenever it was presented to the board, so it's just that representation being shown here to policy committee meeting, but it is, if it's the approval of the committee, it'll be going back for a second reading.
Okay. And then I would like to add policy 2315, invocations. When we approved this policy at the board meeting, we deleted the entirety of number 5, which says that a board member can give the invocation, but we neglected to replace it with something like, in the event that no speaker signs up for the invocation. That was my error, didn't catch that till the end. So I'd like for us to talk about that, because if we don't have something in there, then we're free to do whatever we want.
Is there a second for that? Hearing no second, any further discussion? Okay, all in favor of approving the agenda? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
And so that passes. Moving on to the approval of the minutes.
I move that we approve the minutes as written.
Do we hear a second? I'll second that. Any discussion about the minutes?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
When it says Ms. Barnhart makes a motion to approve the minutes from the September 19th policy committee meeting, these are the minutes from the September 19th. So I think that probably should have been August the 15th. At the September 15th meeting, we are approving the minutes from the August. Would that not be right?
I believe you are correct.
So, yeah, I would just like to swap out minutes from September 19th for minutes of August the 15th.
Any other discussion about the minutes? So then, there's
I'll make
an
an amendment,
Okay.
motion to replace the minutes from September the 19th with the minutes from August the 15th, the verbiage in the minutes.
And Ms. Bradford, that's on page 2 of, if you look at the minutes. So I would second that amendment. Any further discussion about that? All in favor to approve the minutes with the change to August 15th, 2023, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So those minutes will be approved, and Ms. Kadetsky, if you would please make those changes to that. Thank you very much. The next on the agenda is a discussion for the upcoming policy committee meetings. And committee members, I really brought this up to attention. The 2 that are scheduled are on November 21st and then December 19th. Both are designated teacher workdays timeframe, but I just wanted to confirm with Dr. Faust and central office staff, our central office staff will be present during those days. We're still working as far as the functioning school district.
So they're still working.
Okay.
There may be, I don't know if there are any presentations. I'll have to check the calendar. Is anyone presenting anything on those days?
Any teacher
Tuesday
workdays?
before Thanksgiving.
Yeah, the Tuesday before Thanksgiving, and then December 19th falls in that undesignated teacher work days and students are off. So I just wanted a discussion with committee members if there was, I'm comfortable with meeting on the 21st and potentially if we need the December meeting to hold that still.
In the past, we usually skip the December meeting, December Policy Committee meeting, because number one, we will have just changed over committee perhaps, and two, everybody's getting ready, they're in testing mode or they're in, wind down mode, and unless there's something that's urgent, which I don't see anything urgent that we must have before our holiday break.
Ms.
So I would-
Bradford, if you have anything to add?
I would say just keep the option open.
Okay. Hearing back, I know NCSBA has not released edits yet for that, so I have a couple of policies that written down from staff members that we're going to bring forth in the November meeting. So depending on that, we might have a discussion. If we are able to complete everything in November, we might not need a December meeting.
Could we look at the 14th of November?
Of November, we will be in training. The board will be, so I will not be able to do that. So at this time, I'm fine with keeping the November 21st on the schedule, as well as potentially being able to cancel the December meeting.
I'm
one
looking at
thing-
November 21st is not a teacher workday. It is, the 22nd is an undesignated teacher workday. Wednesday, so Tuesday is completely open.
Okay, perfect. And then the only other thing that I would say, Ms. Crable, as far as pressing needs, the Parents' Bill of Rights is enacted in January. So if there are any changes that we need to make sure we come forth, that would be the only thing as far as pressing matter that I'd say could require a meeting in December.
And I agree.
But with that, we're going to keep those dates open with a potential possibility, if we're able to finish everything in November, to cancel the December meeting. Does that sound correct for committee members' consensus?
Sure.
A recap? Okay. That's going to bring us to our first policy, Policy 2300. And the first three policies that are on this agenda, I had written down in my notes that the policy committee members had discussed with potential changes from the ad hoc committee suggestions. And I have before me the board recommended suggestions. And so in policy 2300, when we were looking this over, one of the suggestions came from topic 2, number 1, that we had approved at the October board meeting, which was to firmly establish the length of the monthly board meetings to not exceed 4 hours. And so I would like to see that reflected in our policy here. If you look at B, number 1, regular meetings.
Is that posted? There's no changes, there are no proposed changes in the policies that we're looking at. So I know you put them in the main points, but, I thought our protocol was that we insert them in so we don't have to find it and that we are all talking off the same page. But the first 3 that we're talking about don't have any posted changes. So I'm having a hard time figuring out where you want to put all of these things.
And I'm trying to explain it right now, so I appreciate that. If you look under B, types of meeting, number 1 is regular meetings. To insert the sentence, and I will happily take suggestions from our attorney, but to have the meeting will not last more than 4 hours, which comes from a recommendation that the board adopted. And I'm just trying to see where the committee consensus stands with this.
Madam Chairman,
Yes, Ms. Bradford.
were you thinking you would put that after the first sentence in B1 on page 19 or 1 of 3, depending on how you're looking at it? Is that where you're thinking that would go?
I would think specifically under the regular meetings would be the most
Right.
effective use.
Will you read where you think you want to put it in, since it's not up there for us to read?
Paragraph starts, regular meetings will be held at the first Tuesday of each month unless impacted by a holiday. The superintendent shall keep on file the schedule of regular meetings with the predetermined time and place. The meeting will not last more than 4 hours. The schedule will be revised only in accordance with legal requirements for notice. Generally, all routine or non-urgent matters will be acted upon at a regular meeting. Mr. Vogel, with the insertion of that sentence, would you agree that that is a natural flow of where that would be, or would you suggest a different placement for that?
I think that's perfectly fine.
Committee members looking at those two topics, the other thing that I had jotted down to look at, well, first, is there a consensus that we would like to see that reflected in this policy?
I
Ms.
can agree with
Bradford,
that.
you would agree with that? Ms. Crable?
Sure.
And the second, topic 6, number 2, that the board had approved, the recommendation said to discontinue middle of the Board of Education monthly meetings, closed sessions. And I didn't necessarily think that that fit in this policy, but I had brought it up for discussion. And it
It
said.
doesn't. It goes in the next policy.
The next one, okay. So then, with that being said, with the insertion of that sentence 2300, Mr. Vogel, if you could make that edit and then to bring that before the board in November?
Is that something that Ms. Kadetsky can't make the edit on? Just insert it? Why does our lawyer have to do that? I mean, that's what, I think she's perfectly capable of inserting that.
That is fine. And on the little cheat sheet chart, it says changes from the attorney, or it says or district. Okay, so that's fine. Ms. Kadetsky, if you're comfortable making those changes in 2300 to be moved forward before the board?
Madam Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
are we going to take a vote on that?
Yes, that's what I'm trying to do now. So I would make a motion to, with Ms. Kadetsky making those changes,
Could you
to
read the
move forward
changes,
before the
please?
board.
Read them out, what you're doing.
The meeting will last no more than 4
Okay,
hours.
under B1.
After the place period before the.
Yep,
Second.
and that's the only change, right?
Yes, ma'am, unless if other committee members have other insight, but this, as far as looking over the recommendations that the board approved, I feel like this is the most appropriate change to make. And I would make a motion to do that.
Second.
Okay, all in favor to move those forward with these changes that we said? Aye. Any opposed? So that's going to pass under 2300 in the top right corner, policies existing, and Ms. Kadetsky is going to make those changes. So the next two policies, the first one is 2330, and I had listed topic 6, number 2, which says, again, the discontinue middle of the Board of Education monthly board meetings closed session. Any board meeting closed session for a monthly meeting would begin at 4 p.m. or earlier, or if more time required, then adjourn into closed session and come back out for the starting meeting time. And so committee members, I just brought this forth for a discussion if we felt that we needed to reflect this in policy.
I don't think we need to reflect that in policy, because by putting times, that's more procedural, that's not policy-driven.
Ms. Bradford, do you have any feedback?
Well, looking at it yesterday, I didn't, but looking at it now, we have this suggested guidance on the agenda format, and right in the middle is closed session as needed. So I would think that we would, if we wanted to amend in any way, we'd want to maybe move that or insert the little phrase that you just said, discontinue middle of the monthly, discontinue closed session in the middle of the board meeting. You could put it right there. Because the last sentence under A is additional closed sessions may be added in an appropriate place when needed. So another alternative would just be to strike the closed session in the middle of the meeting, and you're covered by what's above it, the last sentence under A. That's my suggestion.
So I agree with Ms. Bradford, where it said it should have been highlighted as a suggested guidance, so that everybody knows that we're taking out the word template and we're putting in suggested guidance, so that's good. The additional closed session, if this is just guidance, then it doesn't matter where we list it, because the chair is welcome to adjust this as he or she sees fit. So I don't think we need to be talking about where it's going to be. That's a procedural thing. If you were so inclined to make that, just pull closed session out and put it put it at the end, before announcements. But it says suggested guidance, so it doesn't mean we have to do it. And why we're looking at that, work session should probably have a bullet, because that would be another of those optional things. But yeah, I don't think we need to really codify where, since we already said this is just suggested.
And I'd agree. I appreciate the conversation, committee members. I know that this was something that we had discussed potentially making changes, but like you pointed out, Ms. Bradford, the additional closed session may be added in the appropriate place when needed. So this allows for that template, and I don't think any changes are needed for this policy.
But it's not a template.
It's a suggested guidelines.
Right.
I'm sorry. Thank you. So I would make a motion just to keep this policy as is.
I have one more, we'll see if we get a second.
Madam Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
remind my memory, please. Did we pass this policy with the suggested guidance?
Yes, ma'am,
last
that
month?
happened, yes, that happened
23?
at the October board meeting.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So we don't need to do anything, that's already done.
Correct. So
Okay,
I would just
thank you.
keep this as is, and
I
we can do
did
that in
have a
form of a
question,
motion.
though. When you're reading down in there, it's in, when we're talking about how we put information in, I'm trying to figure out, I didn't write the paragraph. It says all requests to have, when we're talking about items being on the agenda.
The second to last, Ms. Bradford's the second last paragraph, the last sentence, all requests to have an item of business placed on the board, that one?
Yes.
Board's agenda?
Yes. So when you're reading this policy and the next one that we're going to talk about, it says all requests to have an item of business placed on the board's agenda must be received at least 6 working days before the agenda review meeting. So is this going to count as the agenda review meeting template suggested guidance also, because we're moving some things there? So this says at least 6 working days before the agenda review meeting, but the agenda review meeting is a board meeting. So, and then in the next policy down, it says it has to be in 5 days ahead of time. So are we talking 5 days, 6 days, 11 days? I mean, we got a lot of days. So I don't know why we pulled out the agenda review meeting when the agenda review is a meeting, agenda review meeting. So when our policy says board meeting agenda, does that mean just regular board meetings, or does that mean the agenda review meetings that now are sort of quasi board meetings?
And Mr. Vogel, I'll ask you to jump in a second, but what I recall from our last meeting, we discussed agenda reviews were a specialty called meeting, so we didn't
Yeah.
have it named specifically as an agenda review. It would classify under specially called meetings, so that we could have that flexibility, and it already lays out the protocol for specially called meetings. And I just want to verify that my memory is correct in that. So Mr. Vogel, if you want to jump in with that.
I think the question surrounded whether this format, this suggested guidance, is for regular board meetings, or should it be is it for every single meeting, including agenda review meetings? And I think that the intention is that this is a suggested guidance of a format for regular board meetings.
So then, bringing that up, Ms. Crable, it sounds like this should say before the board meeting, not agenda review meeting. And then to specifically. So, Ms. Bradford, looking at this policy, if you look at that second to last paragraph, to cross out agenda review and say before the board meeting.
Well, just for the point of discussion, if you're having an agenda review to examine what will happen at the board meeting, you're now examining the agenda for the board meeting at the agenda review. So I would think that you would want to leave that in there. The agenda review is to review the agenda of the board meeting. Therefore, you have to review the agenda of the board meeting.
But my point was, we're switching over a lot of stuff to the agenda review meeting. So I just want to be clear on when, so this really means that we have to, for the agenda, let's like for the November meeting coming up, we'll use that as an example, which will be November the 6th. That means we have to have all of our items in 6 days before the agenda review, which would take us back to would take us to like the 20th. So we basically have to have all the items for our regular board meeting in like 11 days ahead of time, right?
I think the dates in some of our policies need to all be matched up.
Right,
but I don't
that's
think
what my
it's
point
something
is.
We can fix today. We noticed when the ad hoc was doing its work that some of these dates are not in sync with each other. But we're not meeting them anyway. So I don't know that to do this on the fly today is the best use of our time.
Well, if we're modifying this policy, then we should be fixing it now. And if the ad hoc committee noted that, then the ad hoc committee might have brought that in some of the recommendations. So I'm just want us to be clear on what number of days we're looking at, so the board members know and our senior staff know when they have to have presentations available, because the next one's going to talk about when it has to be uploaded and
Right.
delivered.
And so what I think the confusion is here, like, one, we're talking about at least 6 working days. So if it's changed to the board meeting, then that means at the agenda review, if we have central office staff bringing forth something, we can still place that on the agenda. And I think that was part of the design of the agenda review, is understanding that there are going to be items that come up to have that. What I think you're talking about too, Ms. Crable, is when staff need to be prepared to have presentations, and we're going to touch on that a little bit later. But this is just saying at least, I mean, I would be fine with changing it from 6 to 5, because I think that's what our other policies are saying, 5 working days before the board meeting. All requests to have an item of business placed on the board's agenda must be received at least 5 working days before the board meeting. And that's what the protocol that typically has been used.
Madam Chair, if I may?
Yes, Mr. Vogel?
I think that the issue is that's been identified is whether the board needs to know an agenda item essentially 2 weeks before a regular board meeting, or whether the 1 week or approximately 6 days is sufficient. And I say that because the current language would require an item 6 working days before the agenda review meeting, and the agenda review meeting occurs a week before the regular board meeting. So that's essentially a requirement of 2 weeks. Whereas it would seem to me, and the committee is, can do otherwise, that the idea of the agenda review meeting is to make sure that a week before the regular board meeting, agenda items are identified. And that is sufficient, as opposed to requiring a process that begins 2 weeks before the regular board meeting.
Dr. Faust?
So what my understanding has been is that those 5 days or 6 days before the agenda review, so individuals submit, board members submit information to the board chair then submits it to me to let me know what we need to take care of. So it takes the senior staff to do the research, to build the presentation, to go over the presentation, make sure that it's adequate. Those days were courtesy days for, I shouldn't say courtesy, that was the process Because what typically used to happen was it would just be before, up until I got here, the agenda review was just between the superintendent and the board chair.
Right.
There was no, I created this, but it's taken wings and gone totally in a different direction. So it was always to make sure that what was on the agenda is what we had the information for to be able to present it. Now, if we're getting out there and we're saying, okay, at an agenda review, we want to create and put new items out there, honestly, I don't think that's fair for the team to then they've got to pause whatever they're working on, then find the research, and then you don't get all of the information. So then it becomes not a solid presentation, and we're providing information that may or may not be fully evaluated. So that's what the 5 days were, or 5 or 6 days, what it was. It wasn't you come to the agenda review and then you say that I don't want this on there. That would typically say we'd put that on the next meeting. And then if it was something that was really, really just there, then a board member may, if they had all the information and there wasn't an action taken, then it was a business meeting at that point, not for us to actually have to do the presentation. And that's what.
And then kind of along those same lines, in the next policy we're going to be looking at, it says that we must post all these documents 5 days before. So if we're going to if we're going to be hearing presentations during the agenda review, that means 5 days before that, we have to have all the stuff that the preparation work from your staff. And that includes the minutes. So we've been behind on minutes. We've been, because, Crystal's just trying to keep up. And then presentations aren't quite ready. So I just think we need to be a little more clear, because we've got all these dates, and the senior staff is the one that has to do the presenting to us.
So we've reached our time on this, but from the discussion, it sounds like we're fine with keeping the policy as is so that we can have our central office staff plenty of time to be prepped for the agenda and by the agenda review, but not necessarily that they're presenting the item at the agenda review. I think that's where.
Well, we've already decided there's a lot of things that we are presenting at the agenda. Yes, so we haven't decided that.
So committee members, do we want to vote to extend discussion of this or to keep this in committee? I am fine personally, and I would make a motion to just keep this policy as is.
I'll second that.
And then we're going to have to come back and discuss it at another point in time, because our number of days don't jive. And so we can go around in circles on it, or we can just decide right now. We pick our days or not. But it's going to come back up. And it's going to come back up before we know it in the next policy, when it says when things have to be posted.
Well, and I appreciate that. So I will, Dr. Faust, if you want to look at with your team, what is the best number of days, and to bring that to for the policy committee meeting. But at this time, there's a motion and a second on the table to keep this policy as is. So all in favor of doing that? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, and Dr. Faust and his team are going to look at to what is the best number and provide consistency with that. So bringing forward, it's policy 2335, and this is the advanced delivery of materials. I wrote down topic 4, recommendation 1 and 2, which say the following: schedule information items and presentation by the staff and guests for agenda review. Informational presentations will no longer be made at monthly board meetings. And the second recommendation that was adopted by the board: move all presentations by the superintendent, chairman, and board members, committee reports, and announcements to the agenda review meeting. And so this is talking about the advanced delivery of meeting materials. And this discusses the regular and interim board meetings. And so what I wanted to have a discussion today is, do we want to add a paragraph discussing specially called meetings, which is what the agenda review is classified under, to discuss that recommendation 1 and 2 that was just read out loud? And committee members all open for discussion.
So where do you want to put all those things you just read out? Because it's not in here for me to read.
I just made a discussion, I'm opening the floor to a discussion to say, right now, the policy simply only outlines a regular or interim board meeting. What I feel would be most appropriate is to try to add another paragraph for specially called meetings, which is what the agenda review would be formatted under, and list those recommendations. And so
So read what you want.
Ms. Crable, I'm trying to gather consensus right now with the committee members. So the actual verbiage right now would be, I don't have the exact amount, but I'm trying to get feedback from you all so that we can create that. So if that's not something that you feel is appropriate in this policy, I appreciate that feedback, but this is where, when I was looking over, I thought this would fit.
So
Well,
can I ask
go
a
ahead.
question for clarity?
Yes.
So at the agenda review, when it says informal presentations will no longer be made by monthly board business meetings. So at the agenda review, staff would make their presentations there. There wouldn't be a vote. At the board meeting, it would just have, would say budget. So look at it actually, it would say budget. She wouldn't come up to the podium. The board would just vote at that time.
Correct.
So what I would say is I would change the wording from informal because that would be a formal presentation. Informal would be, I think, just a conversation. There's no, if we do informal, then they're not going to put together a presentation for the board. They're just talking from where they are. So I would say we would amend that to say presentations will no longer be made at the monthly board business meeting, and move all presentations by superintendent, chairperson, board members, committee to agenda review meeting. We just take out
That
that word
word-
informal.
So where are we putting that? I don't even, I'm not even following the flow of the discussion on where we're going to do it. We don't have interim board meetings anymore. So, I mean, an interim board meeting really is just a special called meeting, if you look at the definition.
I think this one, it says just advanced delivery of meeting materials. So for me, what I was taking from this is just board meetings.
Right. Regular or just,
So then what you're saying is this would not need to be updated with the recommendations that were adopted by the board?
Well,
Or you're saying
it
this
does.
policy will?
This would need to, because what we would now be
Yes.
doing is making our presentations at the agenda review. The formal presentation will go on the agenda review versus, because that's going to cut down on your hours at the board meeting. Your agenda review may be a little longer, but the board meeting will be at the 4-hour time limit. So I was saying here at the agenda review where we would come in and everyone's sitting around, we would do our presentation and then
Yes.
questions, all those things could be taken care of. And then the actual formal vote would take place a week later.
Madam Chair?
Ms. Bradford? Yes, ma'am.
Could Dr. Faust suggest where he would move that informal to formal and add any language? Where in what we're looking at? Does he have a suggestion?
So what I was thinking is at that second, where it has main points and it says also for discussion, is presentations will no longer be made at monthly board business meetings and move, because the word is informal. I would say we would just take out the word informal and just say presentations will no longer, because those meetings,
put that in this policy.
yes, 2335.
right, I'm just having a hard time. I'm translating the information from main points. I'm not meaning to be adult. I'm just trying to find out where it's proposed to go in here.
So what I'm reading is
Okay.
from, I'm sorry.
You're reading from the main
From
points?
the advanced delivery of meeting materials. So that to me means that before the meeting, in advance, you have to have items.
Right.
And so these items would be delivered. So you get back there, it's going to tell you the days when they have to be sent so that we can do the presentation. So it's like 5 days prior to the regular or interim board meeting. That's at the top of that next page. So there, what I'm reading is from the main points.
Okay.
So in that paragraph
Yeah.
here, but on there, it says at least 5 days prior to each regular or interim board meeting, the superintendent shall provide the following materials to each board member. So at the agenda review, or actually you get it, it's the proposed agenda, minutes of previous meetings. You're going to get all these things at the
Agenda
agenda
review,
review. Any supporting information, materials that would assist the board in becoming informed. And so we will basically be taking the presentation that we would do at a board meeting and put them at the agenda review.
Correct.
And that would be what I would consider a formal presentation versus an informal.
Correct.
So then, in looking at this policy, right after 1, 2, 3, and Mr. Vogel, please chime in if you think there's a better spot for this, but would we put formal presentations and committee reports will be given at the agenda review? And
The special called meeting agenda, I mean, I think we should delineate that, because now here's as you're talking through that, Ms. Barnhart, and if we have to have these things posted 5 days before the agenda review, that means we have another 5 days before that we have to submit stuff. I mean, so we're talking about basically submitting stuff the day after the last regular board meeting in order for you guys to research it and put it up there.
I mean, we could add another sentence that says the materials that go along with these presentation and committee reports will be posted 5 days prior to the
That's what it says
agenda
already,
review.
yeah.
So
To the agenda review, it says regular or interim meeting. So what you're saying, there's not a spot right now for an agenda review. That's why I'm saying I feel like there should be a spot for an agenda review, specifically discussing what you're saying, to having it
Then we
5
need to
days
say
prior.
that up 5 days prior to regular, interim, special board meeting. It can be whatever meeting we have, that we have to have the stuff up 5 days beforehand. And I'm not disputing that. I think that's good. But that means that we have to have the information that we want, according to the policy we just approved, 5 days before that. So we're backing out. By adding this agenda review with all of the materials that we want to see at it, we are essentially treating it as a regular board meeting with a different suggested guidance, format. But we're asking a lot at the agenda review. We're asking for presentations. So we have to give the staff the time to put together the presentations, and we have to give Crystal the time to get the minutes, that we want, up there and ready to go.
Well, and I think there's two things, and as we were discussing, I wrote down some language here, but if we had formal presentations and committee reports will be given at the specially called agenda review meetings. The materials for those presentations will be provided to the public at least 5 days prior. And so there's a distinction here where, because the board has voted that we are no longer doing an information item section, we are doing those at the agenda review meetings, which is a specially called meeting. Those items will have to be 5 days notice from agenda review versus the other items that are on the agenda, for example, new business, old business, consensus, things like that. Those are still 5 days prior to the board meeting itself.
So for clarity, for me,
Yes.
for the team. So the 30th is the meeting, the agenda review. So we'll be doing a presentation there. The board would have all their items, and I'm assuming we're talking about working days, not weekends.
It says working days.
So the 23rd. So what typically would happen for us would be, you get those in, we would have our presentations ready for that meeting, and then we would post the items, or Crystal would release it for the public on the Thursday, I think it's the Thursday before the Tuesday board, the official board meeting. So are we now saying that everyone has access on the 30th?
No, so then I misspoke, so provided to the board 5 days before.
Okay.
But this policy says the proposed agenda and supporting materials will be made available for public inspection at the same time that they are distributed to board members.
And that has always been my pushback.
I
And I'll say
know.
that because we changed that. And what was happening is we would still be critiquing, fixing a board member, say, hey, I didn't mean that, I need to fix this. And it would go to the public. And so then we're having to, once it's actually posted, it's it's harder to take it down and put it back up. So that's my question. It's not that you're trying to hide anything. It's just that if we'll go with budget. If budget is out there and the board is still calling and trying to get questions answered, technically this can now be posted to a media platform. And the board doesn't have an opportunity to gather information because it's out there. So that's why I was saying we need to make sure that the board has the information first. Make sure that all of your individual questions are answered, and then you go live with it. That has been the whole, I think, for maybe 2.5 years or something that we've been doing that. And it's because it has, I mean, we have to go through inspection. You'll find that sometimes there may be a word may be taken out, or it's not there, but it's there. And so we just want to make sure that when we post it live that quickly, that the board has had the opportunity to see it.
And I appreciate that. We've come to our time with this topic as well, so.
Madam Chair?
Yes, ma'am.
I agree with Dr. Faust completely on that. So I'm going to move that we hold this till next month. And while we're
second that.
looking at it, let's deal with what he just brought up, because I've agreed with that all along. While I respect the public's right to be involved in every minute detail of what we do, the nanosecond that we're doing it, I think it puts too much of a hardship on the staff, and I think we need to look at that date and move it out.
Okay, we have a first and second to keep policy 2335 in committee. All in favor?
I wanted to make sure that we, as he's looking at it, when it says at least 5 days, it doesn't say working days. And Crystal has been posting agendas on the Thursday at 5 p.m. for a Tuesday meeting, and that's 5 regular days. So I think we need to look at the
The
distinction.
language of that. Yeah, I
Yes.
appreciate that. So that'll be all in favor to keep that in committee? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That's going to be held in committee, and that brings us to 3620. And there was a couple edits with this, one from Dr. Barnes, and then some edits with the Fairness in Women's Sports Act. I did have a question. I'd just like Ms. Barnum to speak for a minute, if she doesn't mind. In policy A, that second paragraph, it talks about eligibility requirements. And there were some conversations that I had with the public as far as what are the requirements and when can kids play, and how does that relate to if kids are being promoted or not? So could you just take a second and speak to that, please?
Yes, so we already comply with this process, and so the requirements under that we have to follow from the High School Athletic Association, although there may be some, some changes in that authority, by meeting that, we already meet the letter of this policy, because it's really a 3 out of 4 courses, and that would already be greater than 70%. But it doesn't necessarily mean it would be 3 out of 4, because it depends on the number of courses the student takes at a given time.
Thank you. And with that, I would make a motion to move this forward before the board.
Second.
Any discussion?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
So in letter A, where the words in red, and I thank you, whoever put these in, thank you for doing this ahead of time, so I have a chance to absorb it all, and have not obtained a high school diploma. Is that from us? Given some other, okay.
Yes, that's the change we look to make, because we added the similar language to another policy.
Exactly. Okay, that's what I was just checking on. The words that are in blue, where did they come from? In letter B, the paragraph, and then A, sub 1, 2, 3, B, and C. Where did those come from? I see a note that said about what was deleted, but I don't see what we deleted. All I see was what we added.
So that's new language from the School Board Association,
Okay.
based, or either Mr. Vogel, based on compliance with Women in Sports Fairness Act.
Okay.
That language
that's
is directly from the
from the
new
NCSBA's
legislation.
requirements?
It's directly from new legislation.
Just wanted to make sure that we is there anything extra in there that is not required by the statute that we have added on our own?
Mr. Vogel, could you just confirm the language here is in compliance with the statute, how it's written, is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. That language is copied and pasted from the statute that was enacted in mid-August that now goes by Session Law 2223-109.
Okay, and so is that something that we need to put in our legal references? Because I don't see it there, and maybe I'm just not knowing the numbers well enough.
I'm not sure whether that session law has yet been codified into a specific general statute section, but again, that's something that we could take a look at and we can do. That doesn't impact the actual content of the policy, of course.
Okay, because I just want to make sure that we are including what we need to include and not adding extra things that our board feels is appropriate without having a full board discussion. But I do want to make a note that it's in there.
Point of order, this goes to the
I understand
board
that.
for
I'm
the
just
full
saying,
discussion.
I think that when we have legal references, we need to quote what those legal references are so that anybody in our district and any of our community members can go back and compare.
Thank you. There's a first and second on the table to pass this forward to the board. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? So that is going to go forward to the board without any changes.
I'm
That
sorry,
brings us.
excuse me, can I mention something about this one?
Yes.
So while this is the letter of the legislation, it does create a change for us in how we implement our procedures. So for example, I shouldn't need glasses with these contact lenses, but okay, let me hold it way out. In the blue section where under C, a student's sex shall be recognized based solely on the student's reproductive biology and genetics at birth, we need to understand that that is a different requirement than in the past because we have complied with what's on the birth certificate. So there are situations where students have edited or amended birth certificates that are fully in effect that may not match genetics at birth or reproductive biology. So that's going to be something that our staff are going to need to have some direction on in implementing for compliance.
I appreciate you bringing that up, and I had a conversation with a few legislators for that very reason to say if this isn't not, in the state of North Carolina, adolescents are not allowed to change their birth certificate. So in the instances that you're discussing, it would be a potential transfer from another state that does allow that, and so that's where it would be a very small window.
So the ones that we have might be students who were born in other states but may have even been here for several years, but petitioning in another state for the birth certificate to be amended. And we do have students enrolled that fall inside that category. So
Is that worth us reopening this discussion to put this on hold? Because I will make a motion to, I'm not certain what it's called, but it's reconsider the motion until we have a chance to put in procedures about that, to keep us,
We won't do any checks.
okay, no?
Yeah, the staff will not be checking.
So, yeah, to clarify, it's already in general statute. We're just not going to be able to create a procedure, nor should we, where our staff verify that it is that it's compliant.
So you put on the table a motion to reconsider, so
No,
you would resend that?
Hold on one sec.
Okay.
Given the state of affairs with the North Carolina High School Sports Association, does any of the wording of the other things that we do, are we still in compliance? Or, I know we're not going to be not in compliance, but is this going to affect us with when we switch over the who has authority.
Right, right. I think the change in authority is going to have some impact on us in the future. We don't have that at this point, but this puts us in compliance with general statute,
Okay.
and we're not out of compliance with High School Athletic Association.
Okay.
The main concern here is what we would press upon our staff as an expectation for compliance of this, which I do not believe we can press upon our staff.
Okay, all right, so I will rescind that motion.
Okay, and so then the previous stance calls for 3620 will be moving forward before the board. And so that brings us to behavior 4300. And this was a change from the NCSBA spring, fall updates of 22. And the board had voted to have a work session. And so this is coming back before the board coming back before the committee, for discussion. In the work session, a lot of conversation was about how typically it was a small percentage of population that really needed that extra added support as far as supporting students, supporting our staff and students that are heavier discipline issues than others. And so we discussed in depth about the matrix, and feel free if you want to jump into any of this, but looking at this policy committee members, these are the two recommendations to consider today.
Question, is number 2 that was struck in blue was,
That's an not an NCSBA, it's a New Hanover County suggestion.
so from our senior staff or from one of us?
I would suggest it.
I suggest that we leave that in. I don't know why we would want to take out something that says that we would not want to ensure equitable treatment of all of our students.
And I'll speak to this, and Ms. Bradford, I don't know if you have comments. I discussed this at large, that we have staff and administrators who feel like discussing and the implementation of equitable treatment means looking at the outcomes. So taking zero regard for the input of what's happening with our staff and how we're treating individuals. Following IEP is absolutely a law thing, so that is not even a discussion here. But I do not want there to be any inclination for two things. One, to think about that it's on the shoulders of staff to have demographics look a certain way when it comes to discipline. And secondly, to discuss with this, we need to be focusing on the input of what we are doing with our students, and with some of them that is absolutely going to be more intentional, utilizing our MTSS. This policy was created with a lot of different interventions for our staff to utilize, for administrators to utilize. And what I want to make sure that we're doing is focusing on the input of those, and not necessarily having that expectation for demographic makeup of an outcome.
And respectfully, I don't see that we have to track input versus output. I just want all students to get what they need. As far as, and that all of our administrators follow what they're supposed to be following. And equitable just means that your students are getting what they need. I'm just wondering if our principal might want to, does that mean anything? Or does Dr. Faust, does somebody else want to weigh in? Because I'm just having a hard time taking that out.
So
Madam Chair?
One moment, Ms. Bradford. Dr. Faust has the floor.
So I don't think that in the words of equitable, when we're looking at behavior, that we're looking specifically at race. And that's the whole thing, I think, that has just turned the whole situation to something that's wrong, is that we don't understand equity and equal. So let's say, for instance, the night before, parents have an argument, doesn't matter, the kid can be purple. And they bring that to school, and they are general ed kids, and they have a complete meltdown and out of what's going on at home. We don't take that in, this would say that we don't take that in consideration of what their home life is, meaning that a parent has just passed away. We'll use that one, parent just passed away. Kid has an absolute freaking meltdown. And if they do those things, well, you know what? I suspend that kid because I don't I take away the equity because the kid, I'm not looking at what happened, what preceded, what caught that kid's attention. I know that there are principles where kids have a disagreement with the teacher or an adult, I don't say just the teacher, and there are things that happen that we have to look at. What was the antecedent for it? And if we aren't able to do that, then we literally will be, I think we take the compassion out of it. And I can't explain this. I mean, I just know that there were kids, who hadn't even been identified, who didn't, they were so young, but they were running down the hallway and actually taking off clothes. We knew that equity something wasn't right, but technically, we weren't looking at that, we were looking specifically at the guidelines. Those kids.
The matrix is what you're saying?
The matrix, yeah. So you have to, and I think there's some federal guidelines in there that we have to do because we will federally be violating, and then we have federal grants, we have federal dollars, and those.
But my discussion becomes, I think the updates that were made to this policy specifically outlines those things that you're discussing. And if my interpretation of this policy is looking at that, so that's, you don't think, so having this sentence or not changes the entire.
This will change it. I'll let, Julia's jumping at the bit, so I'll let her.
And one moment, Ms. Bradford had a comment, so I'm going to let her go first.
Actually, my comment was a point of order. It's 10:56 and we have other things. And while this discussion is lovely and I've enjoyed every minute of this whole last hour, we are running out of time for this meeting.
So are you
I
saying
make a
to,
motion that we extend the discussion on this because it's vital to the success of our school year going forward.
is there a second for that? Okay, hearing no second, I do agree with Ms. Bradford's point of order that the time restriction. So Ms. Bradford, do you want to see this stay in committee or move this? Do I hear a motion coming from you is what I'm asking.
I'd like to make a motion to keep policy 4300 in committee.
I'll second that. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That's going to stay in committee. So
Ms.
that
Barnhart,
brings forward.
as we're keeping it in committee, that you may want to look at the sentence that was added by the NCSBA. Teachers, school-based administrators, parents, and law enforcement will be consulted when existing student behavior policies are revised and such new policies are created.
That's in there.
I know it's in there, but my question to you is, what have we done as a policy committee to reach out to teachers, school-based administrators, parents, and law enforcement to let them know about this policy? Like, are we going to have a comment period? Because that's what this new policy is saying that we have to have, and yet we're trying to pass the policy without consulting them. So I would respectfully ask that somebody from this committee, all of us perhaps, or you as our leader, reach out to those groups that we're supposed to reach out to.
Okay, so policy 5008 is automatic notification system. This is just a policy for second reading. I would move this before the board. I make a motion to move this before the board.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The next policy,
Did Ms. Bradford vote?
Ms. Bradford, did you say aye?
Yes.
So that passes 3-0. The next one is the fraternization policy. This is coming back. This is a second reading. There's some small grammatical issues. It's policy 7305, changed from 6081. But I would make a motion to move this forward before the board. Again, it's grammatical issues. This is not changing the policy itself.
Second.
All in favor?
Discussion?
Any discussion?
In paragraph 5, where it says, or if it's appropriate with the school board chair, since this is a policy that is specifically for our staff, why would we be notifying the board chair I'm thinking the only reason we would is if the superintendent were involved in the violation of the fraternization. Is that correct?
Dr. Barnes, if you would speak to that.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And
There
then.
needed to be a provision there because there is one employee that the
Correct.
superintendent's designee does not supervise. And
Yep,
that's
I'm
him.
just making sure
Yep.
that we're all clear.
Or her.
That we don't report things like this to the board chair. We report things like this to the superintendent. And then one other question, hold on. In paragraph 8, it says that the subordinate employee gets moved. And I am just wondering why it is that the subordinate employee has to bear the burden of all these kinds of things. Why would we even move a subordinate employee, move somebody into a position? I know we have lots of paragraphs that talk about what if, but I just have a hard time with the subordinate person getting the brunt.
So
Madam-
generally, what would happen is I would work individually with the two employees in question. I think the concern about subordinate employees, they're generally sometimes only one person that can do one job, but subordinate employees may have several different locations they can move. But generally, what it would be is a conversation between both employees and myself.
Because I'm thinking that the supervisory employees should already know that this is taboo.
It may happen after he becomes supervisor.
Okay.
Okay, so there's a first and second on the table to move this policy for second reading before the board. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? It's going to move forward.
We don't have any legal references in there other than that.
It says legal references, GS 115C-47.
I know, it was embedded into the thing. Thank you for listening to me.
The last policy is 7205, Standards of Professional Development. This would be going, I will make a motion to move this forward before the board for second reading.
I'll second that.
Discussion.
Yes, so I'm looking at this policy, couple things. If we scroll all the way down to the bottom, we don't have, we have cross-references with our own internal policies, but there is no legal references. So I want to make sure that we get the appropriate of those in there. When we are looking at when I listened to the policy committee meeting from last time, and I heard that Dr. Barnes had mentioned that this policy needed to have some more discussion with senior staff and how it relates to instruction and accountability, how it related to student support services. And I don't see any of those discussion items, included in there. There seemed to have been some controversy on who brought forward this policy. Us as a district, senior staff, us as board members, or us as our legal advice. So I wanted to just see how we had talked about those. And then each of the itemized statements, I have no problem with putting this all together in one thing, but I think each of the items that has a standard that we're asking our employees to do, if it refers to an existing policy, I think we should say it right there with it so that people don't think that this is a whole nother policy that employees are being just demanded to do. And not that there's anything wrong with, following the rules, but I think we should call attention to that. And like if we look at letter X, it says in there, employees shall support efforts to ensure a safe and healthy work environment in accordance with policy 1510, 4200. So why can't we do that with the others? And then,
So for clarification, are you saying in every single letter you want a reference to another policy? Is that what you're asking?
if that's what this policy is all about, is compiling it all into one location, then I think we should be clear on what we're doing. And I saw at the bottom, it does have other policies listed, but they are just listed. And there's an awful lot of letter, A through Y, but we've only listed just a couple of the other policies. So, yeah, I just wanted to hear from senior staff on what their thoughts were on that. And we can jump in right now, or, and I can wait for the letter Z. That's my next one.
Is there any comments on that?
Have we had a chance to address all the
I'm fine with
concerns?
the way it's written. We don't put the policy after each statement in all of our other policies. We don't put the legal reference in the policy reference. I think it's just too much. And I would point out that it is 11:05, then we need to move along.
But respectfully, this is a policy that we are making up, and the other school districts don't have this policy. So I had a hard time even researching this. So if we don't want to do that, no big deal. But I do have the biggest problem with letter Z. Letter Z, the text in that is similar language that was used in one iteration of House Bill 187 that was introduced by Representative Eiler from Brunswick County. And this bill did not pass both sessions, so it is not the law. So we are not required to put this in, again, in a policy that we are creating. When I read the bill, it says, when we're talking about promoting this behavior of students and teachers, and promote, shall mean compelling students, teachers, administrators, and other school employees to affirm or profess belief in the concepts in Section C. Public school units are not allowed to promote. And so,
I just, point of clarification, this says, and Z says, employees shall ensure dignity and non-discrimination schools by not teaching students or compelling.
I understand that.
Okay.
But there's a difference between compelling and teaching. So I just think that this needs a little more discussion and a little more research. There are other school districts that have this letter Z in there, but they, in their policies, but they are embedded more into academic standards. And I just don't think that we want to talk to a teacher, tell a teacher how you teach.
Mr. Vogel, in reference to Ms. Crable's request about legal references, would it be possible to add some legal references to this policy prior to it going before the board?
Well, as Ms. Crable noted, the language comes from a bill that was not enacted, so there's no legal reference to make there as far as a statute that has been enacted.
Okay.
With respect to
So
Section Z.
with that, thank you. With that, we've come to our time, and I will make a motion to bring this before the board before second reading.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
No.
That passes 2-1. That brings us to
Madam Chair?
adjournment.
I move that we adjourn.
Second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.